Well, I guess that's as good a cue as any to start this meeting of the Fredonia Planning Commission. Do my little. All right, so call to order, and then the first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. So. Stand up, face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is public comment. Please note that public comments are limited to 5 minutes per person. Does anybody have a? We have a public comment?
I understand that we don't have to run.
There you go.
Well, please,
It's
please.
okay. So, just two brief things. So, and one thing to think about. So I'm buying the lots in the industrial park. And as soon as you're done the road, I'm going to pile money. And then I'll be back this winter to get I already have plans to get the building approved next spring. And then, but when I was driving here, it made me think, you used to have 15 years ago, still in there, an ordinance that said 50% of a building has to have brick on the side facing the road. So I just wanted to put in your heads ahead of time. So if you look at our existing Meadowlark storage on Meadowlark, so we put brick on 100% of the buildings facing Meadowlark. And then when we went to build another building in the southeast corner, the planning commission said they hated the brick or disliked the brick. And they didn't want any brick on it though. And so instead they had, it's all metal, but they had to put a bunch of trees. So the first building I was gonna build is gonna be a metal brick, but it's back. It's gonna be like 252 feet by 50 feet and 16 feet tall. And its back's gonna be on metal. And it's either gonna be metal or half brick or, but I wanted to think about it ahead of time because it was a thing and I don't feel together, you know, we want to deal with that. You know, so drive around, yeah, we grow these trees and, you know, because otherwise it's just gonna be one, and none of the other buildings.
Right.
In the future, in our 8.5 acres, so it's just something to consider, or we can talk about this winter. And then briefly, so the CSM that I have, from the town of Saukville, so it's a little goofy, it was drawn exactly how they asked me to, anyhow,
you
you
do.
just because it's barely in your 1.5 miles, so you should just be able to bless it, but they, so they missed some deadlines, and then they did a conditional, emergency special meeting, conditional rule, and then they added more things, so they don't really know what it is, and the state of the statutes. But anyhow, it's gonna get done, so probably 99% or 100% of what you see there is exactly how it's gonna be. So I just need you know, with you a little bit, right? And then when you sign it, because of the covenant.
All right, certainly. Anybody else? Public comment? Thank you. Administrator Jenkins, if you want to talk a little bit about
Sure.
serving on the commission.
Yeah, we're going to talk about roles and responsibilities just because a majority of you seated right now are new to the Plan Commission. So welcome and thank you for stepping up. You've had a couple of meetings, but you know, what's that? So the Plan Commission's role is, first off, just in the name, you review plans, right? So site plans will come before you for any new construction that's commercial. You're making sure that one, that they're in compliance with our ordinances, and two, from an architectural standpoint, you're making sure that it matches what you would expect to see in the community, the surrounding neighbors, what's just south of them, right? To make sure that it's aesthetically pleasing, right, for at least what you're comfortable with and what you want to see for the future growth of the village. The other thing that you manage is zoning. So anytime we have a zoning question for you, like an ordinance change, which you'll see a little bit later, if somebody's requesting a rezone of a property, that falls under your purview as well. There's some things that you just give recommendations for and then gets kicked up to the village board level, which we'd address those as they go. But really, your job is to be the pro-development site review people to make sure that everything that is coming into our village is satisfactory both to our ordinances and to what you want to see the future of the village being. So that's a high level summary of what your role is, and just take that into consideration tonight as we got a lot of stuff to go through, and we're happy to answer questions for you as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
President Lindsay, do you want to introduce?
Oh, that's right. Since we do have a relatively new board here and a bunch of new people, why don't we each take a turn to introduce ourselves? We'll start with Blake at the other end.
I'm Blake Bubit. I've lived in the village now for about 3 years. 2 of that I've spent actually in the planning commission here, so I'm one of the tenured members actually. A life short, but by trade, I'm a mechanical engineer. I work actually at a Felton company up in the Kiel area.
I'm Jay Quinker. I've lived in Fredonia about 6 years now. I'm a civil engineer by trade and got roped into this by the administrator. So
I'm Pete Lenz. I'm a psychologist by trade, a professor of psychology. I've lived in the village for 21 years now. And by virtue of being president of the village, I'm chair of the committee.
I am Jerry Ann Wyland. I was born and raised in Fredonia. My family's farm is a mile east of here. I have been living back in Fredonia now for 15 years. And I took my father's seat on the planning commission here because he was on the planning commission for over 20 years.
My name's Ann Redmond. I have lived in Fredonia mostly, well, except for the exception of maybe 5 years since 1979. Graduated from Ozaki High School. I am a construction project manager by trade, and I got roped in as well.
We got to get you somehow.
We should get Administrator Jenkins the lasso.
There you go.
Yep. All right, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, approving the minutes of the March 3rd, 2025 Planning Commission meeting. Anybody have any comment on the consent agenda, or do I have a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
My second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? All abstaining? All right, it passes. On to the site plan reviews. The first site plan to be reviewed, discussion and possible action on site plan Paulson Mechanical Incorporated Building. Applicant Marcus Paulson, Innovation Drive parcel. I'm not gonna read that long.
That's okay. And I'm just queuing this up. So you should have the hardcover site plans in front of you. I'm also going to try to bring these up on the screen here. Do we have representatives from Paulson in the audience? Thank you. Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. So I'll go over a review of what we looked at compared to our ordinances. So when you look at the design standards for the height, size, and setbacks of the building on the lot, everything was sufficient and matches our ordinances, and we're up to code. On the design standards, let me get to a picture of that building. There we go. So as was mentioned earlier in public comments, our M2 zoning requires 50% of the gross area of a wall to be decorative masonry. However, Plan Commission does have the discretion, it's right in our ordinances, that you could decide, you know what, we'd rather not do that. And you could put on another requirement, or you could say that this is perfect just the way that it is. So we have no concern with that building. Again, this is in an industrial park. A steel building like this would be pretty typical. They do have a border you can kind of see as an accent along the bottom there that gives it a little color. The refuse storage is placed and screened appropriately. They're not planning on doing any outdoor storage. And when you look at sidewalks, driveways, parking and loading, let me see if there's a better area for that. All right, they meet the minimum of the 24 feet of the driveway width, which we require. The height of their parking stalls are appropriate, however, the width is not. So we require in our ordinance 10 feet. That is not something that you have the discretion to change. I don't have the discretion to change it. If they really, really wanted 9 feet, then they would go before the Board of Appeals and go through that process. So the recommendation would be to adjust those widths to 10 feet to fit that adequate parking. The accessory landscaping is suitable. So the only change would be recommending moving those width of the parking stalls from 9 feet to 10 feet. Under the general development requirements, they have a little bit of a landscaping. You can kind of see there's a front landscaping way that's in the middle of those two driveways that are coming in. So we'd imagine there'll be some sort of landscaping, trees, flowers, things like that planted. However, we were not provided with an actual landscaping plan. So we'd recommend that they provide that for permits to be issued. And then same thing with lighting standards. I'm sure they're going to have lights for their parking lot and maybe around the building, but we would need a lighting lighting plan to be provided as well as a condition of approval. So overall, the plan meets our ordinances and state statutes. We would approve the decrease of the decorative masonry if you guys are okay with that. Parking stall should be redesigned at 10 feet, and then we would need to be provided with both a landscaping plan and exterior lighting plan. So other than that, we're comfortable with it, and we can answer any questions that you might have. Otherwise, our friends in the audience can as well.
They're front of the building, we're just gonna have to grab the playing full signs.
Store. Yeah.
Trucks and everything else. Yeah, they put bricks up alongside the building walls or not. Gotta go back.
So our ordinance requires a certain amount of trees per the size of the building, so I can provide that to your builder.
So you'll have signage in front, not on the building?
Well, potentially put a sign in the green space in the beginning, or in right when you pull in, yeah, but we don't have plans for that. We're not really going to do that right away. That's something down the road. We are planning the electrical stuff for it, but that's a large kind of cost to put in a lighted sign. So we want to get in the building and start making money before we put that.
Yeah, just a family business, but you know, we're not a big corporation here, so. Do the best we can, trying to get into the village and all the taxes and everything else. Gotta start from the bottom and work up.
Questions? Comments?
Door, the building doors or the?
No, this is the width of the parking stall. Yeah.
That's just lines.
Yeah. The lines. Yeah.
Don't say that.
So I looked up the landscaping requirement quick in M2 zoning. So it says the minimum number of trees on a site, and again, this is the whole site, shall be calculated based on the principal street frontage. 1 tree is required for each 20 feet. So you could even do it, you know, on the side of the property. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be right there in front. Yeah.
So the trees are the ones concerned.
Yeah, we would just need to see that provided somewhere on the map, like X's on the map saying this is where I plan to plant those trees. Yep. Sure. I would still recommend approval. Yeah, yeah. It's not going to stop you from getting approved. We can move forward.
Next step.
I guess quick question, as far as the requirement for And basically, when did that kind of start in the village? I guess what was the intent of that as far as you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah, that I don't know, but my guess is similar to other communities where they wanted majority of the buildings to look somewhat the same,
Mhm.
right? And so just like she was saying earlier, that they were probably more strict about it back then. But as far as what the code reads, it's, you guys have that discretion.
We don't have that. That's the bottom.
I mean, I guess in my opinion, as long as there's some sort of contrast there, I'm okay with, seeing that. I think that's probably what some of the intention was originally, was trying to avoid, a monotone type of building where
Right.
no sort of, contrast to it. So as long as there is some of that present, I don't necessarily think hold of that, but that is just my opinion.
So do we then, are we in agreement that we approve the plan with the caveat that we need the change in the parking stalls? The lighting plan,
Mhm.
and a plan for the decorative materials on the
Yeah,
ground.
so you can make a motion to approve with the listed conditions that I have here.
Okay.
And then just clarify that you're okay with a 0% masonry on the building, if that's what you want.
Do we have a motion? Do we want to continue discussion?
I will make a motion to approve the plan with the 0% decorative masonry and with the stipulation of redesigning the parking stalls to 10 feet and providing the landscaping and exterior lighting plan.
Do we have a second?
Second the motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Abstaining? The ayes have it.
Nice and easy. Good job. All right, first site plan done.
All right, the next item on the agenda, discussion and possible action on site plan Great Land Electric LLC building. I think we were just handed that one.
Yeah.
Applicant Ed Alexander, Parish Survey and Engineering, and again, I'm not gonna read the parcel number. Sorry.
Great. So again, we'll go through the site plan review process for Greatland Electric. This one is a little different because it is along Milwaukee, not within the rest of the industrial park along Innovation Drive, just to give you that perspective. So the design standards, once again, were conforming for height, size, and setbacks. Again, the M2 zoning requires 50% of the decorative masonry. They have 0, and you have that discretion to say no. At the time when we provided you with this, the refuse storage was placed on the street side. They have since gotten rid of that storage or for that refuse, so that's not a concern anymore. There's no outdoor storage on the sidewalk, driveways, parking, and loading. Again, they meet the 24 feet driveway requirement. They did also adjust their footage of their stalls. So they had some stalls that were 8 feet, some stalls that had 9. I believe in the new versions, you've now adjusted to the 10 feet. So that's all wonderful now. The landscaping meets the required amount of trees. They're appropriately distributed on the site. Let's see here. The accessory landscaping does not apply for this because of the small amount of spaces. So that's one thing to bring up, is that depending on the amount of spaces that are on in a lot, we sometimes require for there to be landscaping, kind of like juts out into the parking. But because they have such a small amount of spaces, that's not a requirement. We'll talk about that because it will be a requirement on the next plan later on. And then the lighting standards, the exterior lighting plan has not been provided yet, so we make that a contingency of approval as well. Other than that, this is a pretty easy site plan and we're recommending approval. Good job, guys.
Questions, comments?
I had a question. Which one of these entryways are going to be like the customer facing versus a workshop, or is it going to be a little bit of both? Because you can see there's two doors, 2 bays. Is one going to be for customers coming in versus one your workshop, or?
They could go in.
Okay.
right side of your building, is that for like future expansion for your business, or are you guys looking to put another business in there? Says like your name here, so.
It could be either or, if we need the space or if there's something you guys.
So then at the start, it'll just be the left side that's occupied? Well, yeah, but you store stuff there and so, yeah, sure, I get that.
I don't remember. Did you provide a color scheme for what this could look like?
Yeah, the stone is kind of an outdated thing, you know, that you might want to just think that a little bit.
Do we have any further discussion? Do we have a motion?
Masonry work, as long as there's some contrasting colors there, you know, color all the way throughout, I'm okay with that, but.
In an industrial park area, having, you know, the concrete rules seems a little outdated.
I make a motion to approve.
All right, do we have a second? Oh, approved with condition, with the conditions
Yep.
stated.
I got you.
I'll say.
We have any further discussion then?
Conditions of lighting.
Let me just. Yeah, because you met everything else, so we just need a lighting plan. Yep. That's what I figured.
My brain's down.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor of approval? Aye. All opposed? All abstaining? The ayes have it. Congratulations.
Nice. Good job.
The next item for discussion and possible action is the site plan for 9 Ladies Dancing Incorporated. Applicant Carrie Allison, Cowell Construction, another parcel on Innovation Drive.
All right. Not to give Mr. Kyle a big head, but he probably had the best set of site plans. So thank you for that. We appreciate it. He came in with everything that he needed right away and came asking questions. So we appreciate it. Makes our jobs a little bit easier. All right. So on this one, the design standards were just fine. I'm sorry, the district standards were just fine. I'm going to skip over design standards because it's a little bit more complicated. So I'll cover that one at the end here. Refuse storage was placed and screened appropriately. There's no other outdoor storage. The sidewalk, parking, all of that is just fine. General development requirements, they showed us their landscaping, everything met to code, and then they also supplied us with a sufficient exterior lighting plan, which we appreciate as well. So back on the design standards. So this one is unique because it's zoned B2. So originally, all of our industrial park was zoned with blanket manufacturing zoning. And then when 9 Ladies Dancing came in and said they wanted to build a dance studio, well, a dance studio, that use is not allowed in manufacturing. So they went through the process to rezone the property last year or something like that, and rezoned it to B2 zoning, which is the appropriate zoning for that lot, both to allow the dance studio and because it's location within the village. However, B2 zoning does not allow metal siding as the primary exterior material of that building. And so the question came up, well, if every other building around them is going to be metal, right? It might be kind of odd if we make them do a brick stone structure. So assuming that you are okay with that, later on in the agenda, we're going to talk about one little ordinance change that gives you guys the purview to make that decision on their behalf. Because right now, you cannot, okay? So you would be making the approval contingent on the ordinance update to come. It's a little weird. We checked it out with our attorney. We should be good. But just letting you know that the short story is that there's no way out for a business zoning to get an exception for something aesthetic. Because you can go to the Board of Appeals for like a use variance or an area variance, but you can't go to the Board of Appeals because I want a metal building instead of a stone building, right? That's not allowed. And so the change in the language of the ordinance would give you that discretion, similar to what the Architectural Control Board had before, to say, yes, because it looks and matches the rest of the buildings around them, we're comfortable allowing that change. So just something to keep in mind. Otherwise, you could tell them, to pound sand and make everything stone, although I think Harry might come after me if I let you guys do that. All right, that's enough.
Discussion, question? Comments? I mean, looking forward to I'm sorry? Looking forward to the change in the ordinance that Administrator Jenkins was talking about. It would make sense to have the building here be similar construction to the buildings around it. Eventually, should 9 Ladies Dancing decide to move on, the site may be rezoned again as manufacturing, and then it would have to fit in with the neighbors anyway, so. I don't really see a problem with that in this location. Everything else, I've looked at the site plan before tonight, everything else looks very good. From my non-construction, from my psychological background.
There you go.
Anybody have any more informed comments, questions, etc.?
The building will be blue. The building will be blue.
Great, sure.
Yes, you will have the best landscaping.
All right, that's your goal, Laura, is you got to beat their plans when you come, okay?
There you go.
Why I have a fairly wide layer at the top going on into
Mhm.
the reason I did that is we're low on this site, so we're coming up about 6.5% as you're coming out of the property. So when you're doing that, you have a larger vehicle and that hood is there. I drive a van, so I don't have this problem. But if you have a front end on there, and you're coming up at 6.5%, that's pretty steep. And it's hard to make that turn correctly. And so what you do, if it is a narrow curve at that point, you end up going into the other lane before you make it turn. So consequently, I did that. I actually measured my own driveway to my industrial building. Actually larger than the wide flare of thing. You see the driveway itself. So.
Right.
Those radiuses are really needed there. That's not a ditch there. That's just going down and everything still drains away.
Right.
Fairly good drop.
And that's certainly appreciated, definitely.
Very important.
And you have 2 light poles, right, for the parking?
Correct. See them on the landscape plan and then see them. So the lighting calculations I didn't put in there are only they're here. I didn't put them in there because you can't see those numbers at all by the time it gets to 11 or 17.
Right.
A lot of zeros are on there, doesn't go very far.
Administrator Jenkins, are you able to explain the recommendation you had regarding the parking? You're saying there's like some off-street parking areas. Are you able to kind of point that out, what you are referring to?
Yeah. See that. I gotta reread what I was saying here. Off-street. Thank you. Yep, that was the other one I was gonna point out. Let me pull that up here. So this is what I was mentioning earlier, that when you have a certain amount of spaces, we require landscaping within the parking stalls themselves. And you can kind of see that here. So originally, if they were to do that, let's say they were to take up some stalls by jutting out landscaping here, arguably they wouldn't have enough stalls for the use of the building. And so their solution was, well, instead of jutting out with these landscaping, what if we just add additional landscaping here to create somewhat of a buffer of the neighboring properties? Is that fair to say, Tim?
Yes, actually, your code says it has to be an island, not even a.
Yeah,
piece.
yeah.
I drew it as a peninsula and then I looked at it and it just didn't work. And so I said, let's just skirt the front of that so the car fronts are being shielded a little bit from neighbors. And otherwise, literally, your code says that if you have over 22 stalls, you have to have a percentage of an island out there. And in that type of a parking lot where you're back to back, there's no space for an island.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's just the number count, I think, in your code is what clicked that. And that's why I brought it up.
Correct.
And then I tried the peninsula and that was a ridiculous look, so I went just to shielding the edge.
And the reason behind it is more than just aesthetic. It's arguably it's for congestion, right? So if you have that many cars all backed up or all parked there, they're all backing up at the same time and trying to leave after a dance class, right? Those are meant to be buffers, so that way it allows at least a little bit more wiggle room for vehicles to move. So on that point, if you wanted them to go back to the drawing board and add that, they could, but I kind of agree that, it's not that many spaces. It's not like it's a Walmart, right? Where there's gonna be tons of cars coming in and out. So I'm comfortable with how they have it, but you guys have that discretion. Yeah.
And from a practical standpoint, then you can also, as a landowner, you can push your snow all to the back. And that's the low area, so then it drain from there, so they don't have to be pushing against the landscaping there, so you can get fairly close to the asphalt with the landscaping. So it just all around works. That whole site, if you go back to the site plan, it's actually draining to the south and east of that.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? If there aren't any, do we have a motion to approve? And there was one condition.
I'll make a motion to approve with the, yes, contingent upon the ordinance update that would allow the primary exterior building material to be discretionary.
All right, do we have a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? I'll put the question then. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? All abstaining? The ayes have it.
Right, woo. So just both for the benefit of the plan commission and for the people in the audience. So after this step, it now goes to our commercial inspector, who is new, by the way. His name is Jeremy Pfeiffer. So he'll review the plans if they need to be sent and approved by the state. Then they go before state review as well. And then once we get everything back, then we move forward with permitting and you guys can get shovels in the ground. So pretty exciting. Thank you.
Quite the elaborate process.
That's very much towards the end of the process. So they hand out fire numbers, it's called.
Be able to get on state first by building. And at first building,
And they can't use the parcel number? Okay. Well, okay, well, we can talk with our commercial inspector. Maybe he can expedite that process then. Sounds good.
Next item on the agenda, items for action and or discussion and possible recommendation to the Village Board of Trustees on an extraterritorial CSM review from the town of Saukville. This is applicant Laura Logan.
Sure thing. I take this over. So every once in a while, we'll get these. So anything that's in a 1.5 mile radius around the village, that's in a subservient municipality, so a town, they're required to provide you with any kind of zoning or CSM updates that they're doing within those boundaries. The main reason you look at that is to make sure that, you know, a giant business isn't going to get built right next to something that maybe wouldn't be appropriate within the zoning that we have here in the village. So Ms. Logan is just looking at dividing up some property that she already has for the purpose of, I believe there's more storage units, correct, that are in that area? I'm sorry, which area is this? Oh, residential homes, I'm sorry. All right. Well, the use of it doesn't really matter, but you're approving what the town of Saukville has already presented to us and approved. So it's gone through their process, the plan commission and everything else, so we just need to stamp approval.
Rubber stamp it.
Yep, looks great.
So this would be. But city of Ford
And the data center.
Yes, so that's what's going on, so it's a review, so you don't get a data center, you know,
Mhm.
so you can, or you can annex it. So like the land north of me, like if someone wants to use it, you could annex that. You know,
Yeah.
but it's just a small portion, and actually just rezoned 22 acres. Or divided.
All right, so we've already gone through this with Saukville, so the recommendation is to approve.
Yeah, and this is a recommendation to the village board. So that.
Recommendation to the village
Yeah.
board to approve. Do we have a motion to approve sending this up to the village board?
Make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, do we have any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All abstaining? The ayes have it. The next item, discussion and possible recommendation to the Village Board of Trustees on sign permit application for St. John's Lutheran Church.
Thanks, Mark.
Mark,
So.
You're up again there.
Yes, I think so. So we have a review for a sign. The way our ordinance reads is that if you put up signage in commercial or industrial spaces, then there are specifications, right, to the size, the lighting and all that other stuff, right? In public institutional zoning, there are no requirements. The requirement is that they present it to you all and you decide if it's good enough. So they put in an application, you could see it. It's a cemetery sign for their new expanded location on the north end of their property. It wouldn't be abutting any of the traffic streets. It would be more so along their driveway. If I can get to it here. If it did have to meet the standards of our commercial or manufacturing code, it would meet those standards. So they're not asking for anything that's, you know, grossly out of question here. But it's a baseline stone sign that would be facing towards the church itself along that driveway that abuts the north end of their property.
And that would not be located on the street, that's up at the end of the driveway. It would be located more centrally right where the new
Yes.
cemetery is.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if they supplied a map. They kind of did. It's kind of hard to see
Kind of
here.
small, yeah.
I don't know if I can zoom in.
Cemetery, isn't it north of the building?
Actually, they're putting in a new cemetery.
expanded the
They're expanding the cemetery to the north of the building. They've got the smaller and then across the street, basically, that's.
the existing cemetery,
Yeah,
and the church is here.
last year, they split off this property to expand their cemetery. And so they, if you go over there, you can see there's a little driveway plan for the cemetery to be a little cul-de-sac. And so the sign would be right here at the entrance of that.
I mean, it seems perfectly reasonable to me to have a sign at the entrance to a cemetery, and the image that was shown there looks like a pretty straightforward. I mean, you don't want anything with neon on it, right? Not for a cemetery.
No flashing lights or.
Any discussion, debate? Any motions to approve? Or again, this is approved to the village board? Or
This is just approval.
This is just approval,
Oh, I'm sorry. No, you're right. You're right. It is recommendation to the village board.
recommendation to the board. So any motion to approve recommendation to the village board? And any seconds?
A second.
All right. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, then the question, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All abstaining? We have another approval. Next item, discussion and possible action to set a public hearing to hear public comment on and reaction to ordinance 2025-03 pertaining to design standards in business and manufacturing zoning districts. I think I see what we need to talk about here.
All right, so this is what we touched on earlier. So again, right now, the code does not allow for a path forward to change the aesthetic look of a building outside of what our ordinances allow. Every other thing does, right? If a applicant was not happy with the decision of this body, they could apply for a variance and go before the Board of Appeals. But in this particular instance of the aesthetics of a building, if you guys said, no, we want it to be such and such a way, there's no path forward for an applicant to have an option or to be vetted at another place, as is typical throughout our ordinance. So to get around that, what we've worded here is something that's similar to the exact same wording as you saw with the masonry earlier. So in our ordinance, it reads that the masonry requirement is 50% unless the plan commission has the discretion to approve other installation. And so we took that same verbiage and we now blanketed it throughout the design standards of all of the business and manufacturing districts. So that way, when these requests come to you in the future, you guys have at least a little bit more flexibility. To give you some background for those who don't know, the village used to have an architectural control board that would be the ones that are monitoring more of these aesthetic things. But even under that board, they technically didn't have the power to say yay or nay either by our ordinances. So this kind of gives you that discretion that you should have as the plan commission to make those decisions. So that way, when people come to you for options that you think are clear, like the one that we saw before, then you have that ability to do so. Now, again, this doesn't magically give them a path to the Board of Appeals. They could still, I don't know, you could have that discretion and choose not to use it, right, and require those things. They still don't have a path before the Board of Appeals, and that's just kind of that. But at least you have that option to accept something that'd be different than what the ordinances say.
So this would not open them up to access to the Board of Appeals?
No, because that's a state statute of what you can bring to the Board of Appeals. Yeah.
Any discussion?
You look confused, Jerry. Okay. So even if you're confused, the way this works is an ordinance change in our zoning code is the longest process throughout our whole, you're going to see this again, and then the village board's going to see it twice too. So this is not a quick process. This is your first glance looking at it. So you can see discussion and possible action to set a public hearing. So that's the motion you're making tonight, is to set that public hearing at your next meeting. So it'll come before you again. We'll send out notices. People can come and voice their opinion, yay or nay for it. And then after that, then it goes to the village board for approval. They have a first glance at it, a second glance at it, and then they approve it.
So the public hearing would be for people to say, we want you to have this authority or we don't.
Correct.
I mean, personally, it seems to me that we should have the flexibility to make decisions like this in situations like that, where you have, something that clearly would makes sense, I guess. Put it, I don't know how the construction folks here feel, but,
I think it makes sense for. I guess that in order to have at least the ability to contest our decision or the decision of somebody with that ordinance, so I think that makes sense to do that way rather than have it, pretty much be a yay or nay right here on the spot.
right. So then do we have a motion to, set a public hearing for this, to progress with this change in the ordinance?
That would be to set the public hearing on, let me just double check. The June 2nd.
June 2nd?
And make a motion to set a public hearing on June 2nd for continuation on the ordinance.
Do we have
Second the motion.
any discussion? All right, put the question, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? All abstaining? All right.
Abstain, because I don't know what you're voting on right now.
Right. Mine didn't start either. I know the batteries seem to
Yeah.
go dead real quick.
They do.
That's not good. But anyway,
No. We're gonna have to punch that later.
all right, we are on to the next item. Discussion and possible action to set a public hearing to hear public comment on and reaction to the rezoning of parcel number 090500506002 and 090500505000 from B1 Central Business District to a to be determined residential zoning. The applicant is Hannah Chalip, all right, I'm sorry. Address 415 Fredonia Avenue.
All right, this is a long story, but I think we fleshed it out in the memo here, but I am going to read through it just for the record, so everybody's on the same page here. So, 415 Fredonia Ave, it is a B1 zone commercial property. In 2023, the village approved the division of this parcel from its parent parcel to the west, which currently houses the hair salon and nail business. So if you're familiar with that, that was one big parcel. B1 zoning allows for residential uses only when they are accessory to a business. So in other words, the residence was originally intended to live in as a house, and then you had the business on the west side where the current hair salon and nail place is. When the property was split, the Plan Commission, your predecessors, acknowledged that it could not be used solely for residential purposes under B1 zoning, and the original property owner did not request a rezone at that time. The property was then last listed for sale July of 2024 as a commercial property. Attached in your packet, there was a commercial disclosure. The listing, which invites prospective buyers to bring your business to Fredonia, along with a special assessment letter from our staff that confirmed that it was a commercial business listing. Additionally, earlier in 2024, we had an inquiry that was made about purchasing the property as a residential home. And after consulting staff, that buyer opted not to purchase the property because of the zoning restrictions that were there. So all of these documents and efforts indicate that this property was commercially listed and intended to be used as a commercial property. In August of 2024, Ms. Hannah Cholip purchased the property with the intention of using it solely as a residence, despite several indications that this was not in compliance with the zoning. In October of 2024, Ms. Cholip came to Village Hall to apply for a chicken permit, which point it became clear that she had purchased the property with the intent of using it as a home. Note that you can't have chickens on a business property. Both Ms. Cholip and her realtor were informed of the zoning restrictions, and we provided information on potential business uses for the property alongside the residential use. After a period of time, the village marshal and I reached out to Ms. Cholip for a status update and conducted a zoning inspection, the results of which are attached in your packet as well. The inspection found that no effort had been made to establish a compliant business. So Ms. Cholip was given 3 options: to start an appropriate business, to request a rezone, or begin the sale and evacuation process of that property. Ms. Cholip has chose to apply for a rezone, and that is what the request is before you. So on the request itself, if granted, Ms. Cholip's request would rezone the property to RS3, which is the smallest residential zoning district, requiring a minimum lot size of 8,000 square feet. However, her current lot is only 5,800 square feet. She also owns an adjacent vacant land that she purchased along with the sale of property that hypothetically could combine with this parcel, in which case it would be a single 33,730 square foot lot, so much bigger, which would mean that it would have to convert to an RS5 zoning to be in compliance. So when evaluating this request, we recommend that you consider the following. Big one is the surrounding land use. Would a solely residential property of approximately 34,000 square feet along Fredonia Avenue be appropriate and be in line with the surrounding area? Our Village 2035 planned land use map designates all of that middle area as a planned commercial corridor. So if you make this change to residential, you're right in the middle of what's supposed to be a future commercial corridor. And then finally, consider, was the applicant truly unaware of the property zoning restrictions when all of the evidence points to otherwise? So in conclusion, we certainly empathize with Ms. Cholup's situation, but there's no evidence to suggest that she was unaware of the property zoning restrictions. Additionally, the proposed rezone just does not align with our current land use planning. So as such, we would recommend denial of this request, but we're certainly sensitive of this issue and are happy to have a conversation and a discussion amongst the board. The applicant is here as well. She provided a letter in her application that talks about her scenario, and we can go from there.
Me and my realtor, it was a residential offer purchase, and then lowering, it was a disclosure from the seller, and I didn't know it like a house, it looks like a house. I was purchasing as my first home, and I did not know that it was commercial. I didn't know like a house itself could be zoned as commercial. I didn't know that, just naivety, I guess. But the offer purchase was residential, so even the realtor thought it was residential. She did not know it was commercial, and even said like it shouldn't have gotten approved from my loan officer, so it just wasn't known as an unfortunate situation.
So your loan is for a residential loan, not anything with all commercial, okay. Did they know about this whole?
The loan officer? Yeah, so when I spoke to them, I know the landmark, they just told me that they assumed because of the properties were split from like the salons, they just assumed that that's what they basically assumed.
Which is just unfortunate because again, every document that we provided to the lending agency, I mean, it showed that it was a commercial property. I brought up the map just so you can see, we're talking about this red area right here in the center of the village. So anything in red is a commercial corridor.
I have a question for the administrator.
Mhm.
What we have here is possible action to set a public hearing to hear public debate. So one of the things we could do is set that public hearing to have feedback from the village, other members of the village, the community, reaction to whether this should be rezoned or not.
Yep, absolutely.
I just wanted to make sure
Yep.
that's what we're talking about right
Yep,
here. We're not talking about evicting.
Yep, you don't need to make a
Or
decision.
anything like that. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, thank you. And even my recommendation to deny, that's not your step right now. Your step is to set the public hearing and then make a decision at that point.
Is there a certain type of business that she would need to have? I mean, could she open up an Etsy shop and sell bracelets or something?
So we have a long list. We've provided it to her a few different
Okay.
times. I mean, it varies. You could do, dog grooming, you can sell vegetables, she could grow vegetables in her backyard and sell it. I mean, we're not that specific.
Okay.
What's that?
We kind of were fairly marked, we were talking kind of without an option, and it just didn't seem like that was the option.
Yeah, it might not be specific. Yeah, it might not be that specifically. I'd have to pull up that same list that we've given you a couple times.
Because if you grew vegetables and just threw them on a stand and had a cash box, that would be.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it might, don't hold me to the vegetables. Let me pull up the,
No, hold them to the vegetable thing.
yeah.
She can have chickens and sell her eggs. There you go,
Oh.
Chris.
She can't because she can't have chickens in her commercial property.
But wait, the surrounding property, is that commercial as well?
What's that?
Like the surrounding property, the L-shaped?
As
property?
of right now, yeah.
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 So no chicken.
No chickens.
So I've actually been in this house.
Yep.
A friend of mine, her mom lived in there years ago, and I mean, it's a house.
Yep.
And it would be kind of awkward to have a business inside without, redoing it completely. It'd be like the village telling me I had to, have a business in my house. However, I mean, it was kind of obvious in the paperwork that, it's commercial, so I'm kind of torn here. But again, first time home buying is overwhelming, so.
Didn't have like a description of like the business, so I didn't even, like the Zillow listing didn't show that, so I didn't even like catch that, and it's.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm understanding which building here. Is it the brick house that Joe Klein used to have his washer and dryer business in, or is it the one just west of it that has the nail salon?
It's just east of the nail salon. There's like a driveway space and then
Okay,
there's a
just
little
east of
brick
the nail
house.
salon.
Address
That white-
415.
Yeah, the white roof is the nail salon and hairdresser, and then her house is just south.
Okay,
in
that's-
this map.
Sorry, obviously, I've been here too long.
Okay, this one here,
Yes.
okay.
Was the one
So you had a washer and dryer business?
Yeah, he did originally. I'm going way
I
back.
vaguely
I'm
remember
not
that.
90.
But
All right.
on the
That
business,
long.
on the nail salon.
Oh, I've been living here 23 years, so.
He died, so.
There it is. It's that one. So to give you a list of, I pulled it up here now. So the types of businesses, that I won't run through all of them, but there's artist studios, a currency exchange, an office. Let's see, home improvement center, a secondhand store, a health clinic. I mean, there's a variety of things that are allowed within B1 zoning.
Question about the office.
Mhm.
What kind of office are we talking about? I mean, I, for a decade, taught
Mhm.
from my house in my office in the basement. Would that count? I mean, it's a commercial office. I'm doing my work.
Darn it.
Gotta
So
start
there's,
doing it remotely.
so there's no definition. It just says general office.
General
It's a permitted use, which means that we wouldn't require any permitting. She would just have an office.
Start a business, just start all of that on chickens, that's why.
Yes.
Cause I could come up with a business, but I just also don't think that would benefit the community if I just come up with a little random business to do. I don't feel like it would benefit, like, so I'm not gonna put my heart and soul into it, plus it'd be my vegetables then.
Can vegetables be grown on commercial property? Chickens can't. Can vegetables be grown on such property?
Yeah, I'm looking here.
I'm putting all the questions to the poor guy.
That's his job.
But
I know.
so even if they,
That's his job.
You'd still be sympathetic with it as they're.
so even if, I would say, even if they could, I think her goal is to rezone it for the best use of her property, right?
Right.
So when it comes to the chickens, and there might be other things we'll run into the future that we are not aware of, that we're gonna have different restrictions on a business property than we are a residential one. So if she's gonna continue to live there, right, then we should zone it properly.
Based on your paragraph here, Chris, you're saying you pretty much have to combine both of those parcels since it's below the minimum required.
Or could we have a special compensation for the size of her original parcel?
That might have to be kicked to the Board of Appeals if you do that. So you would have to deny it because it doesn't meet their requirement of your acreage, and then she would have to apply before the Board of Appeals for a use variance of her property.
That might not be a bad idea either.
Yeah, and I guess our concern is that, and Jerry Ann might know better than I do. I was told there was once also a business on that neighboring property that's around there, like a bar that burned down or something like that. Does that ring a bell? See, it's all coming back to you, right? So I don't know if I can get to, if there's a map of both lots here, but Blake, you know,
You're near the end.
okay.
That's all pictures.
Well, anyway, that neighboring, that surrounding acreage is fairly large. And so it personally, from an administrative zoning standpoint, that's what I'm concerned about, is that much acreage is now gonna switch to residential zoning. So maybe a compromise could be if she came back to us with a site plan or survey that grabs some of that land to be appropriate, right, to meet the appropriate square footage, and then still allow a driveway access to a potential commercial business, right, that could be there in the future, like the bar was at one point in time. I don't know who that magic user would be, but I'm just throwing that out there.
Sit on that property and Fredonia comes huge. There you go, sell it. Business.
Wouldn't it be funny if you made money out of all this? Yeah.
You're going the wrong way, Chris.
Yeah, sorry, there's a lot of.
Yeah, you need to go up in the packet, yes.
But you guys can keep talking as I scroll.
As far as you know, it's always been commercial, not residential?
As far back as we could look. Yeah.
Must have been a house at
There
one
was a
time.
house.
Well, but
So
Yellow, it's the yellow
It-
right there on that one. map
the
there.
fact that it was a house is it was tied in with the building next door that was commercial. So you could live there as long as you're running your business off the same property. And when they split the property, that's what caused this problem. Because
So that's what B1 zoning is for. B1 is meant so that way you can live and do business in the same parcel.
like Tom and Jody live above their bar.
Yeah.
And that's.
Why did they split these properties? Do we know?
That was slightly before our time, but it was owned by an investment, a realtor, and I think he thought that was the best use. Cause that way he could sell off that house on the south end, whereas the rest of the property could continue to be used, commercially.
No, where's the adjacent property?
It's
that
around there.
The big L shape 090.
Find it to
Yeah.
the east.
So Hannah owns this house lot here, and then she also owns all of this.
Oh, okay.
So this is where I'm saying that you could just join these together and make one big residential lot. Or maybe she could, I don't know, grab some of this, still have driveway access, and then this could still be a commercial property. You kind of wonky, but. throw it.
And then I would still have to come up with some kind of business, right, if that stayed as.
No.
No, he's just saying making your house property a lot size, appropriate size, and then we could safely rezone it and then leave the rest of it commercial.
I saw in some of your notes, Chris, too, that it looked like there was shared water sewer basically between the two.
At one
properties.
point.
At one point,
and
it was
then
separated.
Split.
Yeah.
ours is split. Okay.
There's just an easement for the driveway, swans.
Okay.
I think that might be your best option is changing your lot size. And then we should be able to approve it. Or, and then go to the board, right?
Have to go to public.
Yeah.
Public
Yeah, there'd be the
building.
steps for it, but
Yeah, we could go through the steps. And then you could be zoned residential for just your house. Leave the rest of it commercial, and then you could probably have your chickens.
And I mean, if you have that large commercial piece of property, you might be able to sell that to somebody who wants to build a business down here.
just make it really clear to them that it's a commercial property.
Yeah.
Clear to
And that you don't want it to be too noisy, but
Yeah.
right behind your house there, but,
Yeah.
you know, that would help pay off a lot of your mortgage right there. you know?
No, so we would recommend, I mean, we can't force you to do anything, but if you wanted to go that route, should meet with a surveyor. So there's companies that do that. And they can resurvey both of your properties and they would create what's called a CSM, a certified survey map, that would realign those borders. And so you'd be asking them to take your property, your house property, expand it to our minimum requirement of 8,000 square feet by grabbing some of the adjacent property that you also own and then leaving the rest as its own parcel. You follow? Or then you would come back to this body, and this could be part of our process at the next meeting, would be for them to review your CSM.
What do you think about that?
I mean, if that would be more feasible than just getting the whole thing rezoned.
Yeah, I guess the decision for you is there a reason you have all that land, right? Do you want to keep it? That's up to you.
Well, I suppose you wouldn't have to restrict yourself to that 8,000 square
Yeah.
feet. You know, you could make it a little larger to give yourself the yard size, not that big a yard, but a bigger yard size then.
Well, and then your chickens can be on your, you can have garden on your commercial and then chickens on your resident.
Yeah.
Is there a minimum size for a commercial lot?
Yes, but it's much smaller. I'd have to look it up in the code.
Oh yeah, if you take a look at the 419, 421 right there,
Yeah.
that's on a very small piece of property.
Yeah.
And that's commercial.
I mean, you could even take the existing, that southern property line where your house is, you could draw it all the way back to the back line. And then have that be all, you still have a nice backyard there. And then anything south of that line there would be the new commercial property.
That still leaves us putting a residential
It does, yep.
property in the middle of the commercial area, but
Yep.
Yeah, but there's also residents around there too.
I was gonna say, if I'm not mistaken,
It's-
isn't 420 basically a residential property as well?
well, about 420, but I think 407,
407,
409.
409, they're all residential right there in that corner.
Yeah, that's what this map tries to show
There
you.
you go. Yeah, I think the yellow right there is that 407, 409. The pink between it and the kind of the dun color is the lumberyard, right?
Mhm.
And so we got the pink area, that's your property and the nail salon.
But yeah, there's residential already kind of around it.
Right, well, it is becoming more checkerboarded and, you know, less focused. And, you know, one of the questions we have to ask ourselves is, do we want to have a future downtown?
Yeah.
Of some sort, or is that something, do we want to be just a bedroom community without that kind of a place?
Well, as it stands, I think we've already talked, Highland is becoming more of a,
To some extent, although, you know, I mean, a lot of the businesses there, I mean, I'm strolling down the street, there's a car wash. There's a couple of automotive deal, you know, the places that work on cars, there's an electric, you know, Sipple or whatever they are. Not a whole lot to,
no, but there's not a whole lot in Fredonia.
true.
But again, that decision doesn't need to be made tonight. You can give direction to the applicant if she wants to proceed with the CSM. And then you guys can set the public hearing. We'll notify the neighbors and then we'll get their feedback as well.
Do you want to look into that, looking into having the mapping redone a little bit? Well, that would leave you with a commercial property and the residential property, the commercial property that you could then either sell or you could become a landlord. You know, but it would give you some more flexibility. If you sold it, like I say, you're probably gonna pay off a huge chunk of your mortgage and, you know, that's good for you. And that leaves that commercial property that somebody else could then develop. If you wanted to do that, I mean, it's a bit of a process for you, but this has already been a bit of a process, and this might be a better solution than some of the other options that are out there.
And another thing that you probably haven't thought about yet, because you're a new homeowner, but you're probably assessed as if you're a business, which means that your tax bill is probably going to be higher than what a residential property would be.
Yeah, and
right?
you've got a lot of
Yeah.
commercial property,
Yeah.
that L shape.
So it'd be advantageous to you, again, in your favor to realign that appropriately.
Would her water and sewer also be at the?
That's what I was curious about too. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you're assessed it or if you're getting charged the commercial rates or not. We'd have to find
Because
out.
that would be beneficial. I mean, there are a lot higher rates
Yeah.
than residential. So if you could look into that person, let her know.
Mhm.
So as far as possible action, do we want to table this and give you a chance to take a look into your options again? And you can bring them back to us. A good question. It's a very good question.
Okay, there's things that have happened in this town in the past that probably shouldn't have happened, like the Legion. Well, the Legion Hall was a commercial property that was made into a home. It's a very awkward looking home, if you ask my opinion. There was another bar hall that was completely made into residential. I understand now that it probably was at one time a residence and a business together, much like what was across the street. But then it became completely residential and it's an eyesore. And then you have the old dime store or whatever it was called, Value, whatever, made into
Apartments.
apartments. And it's just like, we did all this rezoning of commercial land into residential. And as someone who has lived here, I think it was a big mistake all my life. I mean, we have not created a true little downtown. That's my opinion.
Well, and I kind of agree that, having that commercial property would be beneficial for you in the future. I mean, I agree with your house because it's very obvious from looking at the pictures. That's a house. It's not a business. It's a house.
And if it were to be forced to be a business and you decide you're out of here, who's gonna buy it and make it into a business?
Yeah. So if we, just your area, making it like Chris said, rezoning it or making it the minimum square footage and then keeping the rest commercial, at least we still have that commercial option for future. Or you have that commercial option for the future, that if you decide to ever sell the house, you could still hold on to the commercial property and just sell the house. Or keep
vice
the
versa.
house or vice versa, or sell it all in one big fell swoop. I mean, that would be your choice, but it'd be.
So
I
the
think
main
that's
problem
what
with the rezoning right now is the size
Yeah.
of the lots, so. In essence, she needs to make the lot bigger and then it can be rezoned.
I would say the overarching problem is that it doesn't match your master plan. I mean,
Right,
This was put in
that-
place for a reason,
Okay.
or by our forefathers, right? And they envisioned by 2035, which is 10 years from now, that middle of the village would be a little commercial sector. Whether it is now or not, right? That's for us to, I guess, judge, but what do you want the future of the village to look like is the question.
Just what I'm thinking is if we did it that way, just that little part or just a part of it being commercial, I just don't know how that would benefit. I mean, unless I sold it, which I don't really plan to, I just don't know how that would benefit the community either. Like that just staying as an empty commercial lot, just so that it can show up as commercial on the map. I don't know how that would really benefit anyone for if they were, unless I actually sold it and then come up with a business on it or something and just.
Well, the future is uncertain. I know this is your first house too, and how many homes have you had, Chris?
Too many. I bought like 4 first homes.
So, I mean, I'm just saying that, in 10 years.
Yeah.
A lot can happen in 10 years.
But that's what you guys recommend.
Any further?
But either way, do we have to set a public hearing though? I mean,
Not right now.
No, if,
She's gotta come back with what she decides to
with
do
a new
first.
proposal, basically. Right,
Yeah, because if you set a public hearing, you need to be specifying what parcels and what zoning they're gonna be moving to. So because you don't know that yet, right, I can see that you can table it, let her come back with a CSM, and then we'll have more
Explore.
information that we can provide to the residents when we do that.
On that, better to have the public to have a. Well, plan to be rather than the options we're kind of throwing out right now. Come here next month and still not really have an idea of what you want to do
Yeah,
with it.
because
yet.
you need to have your time to research and
Mhm.
I'm sure Chris has some contacts that can help you with changing the lines.
Yeah.
He knows people. He's good at that.
so I think the consensus is that we table this for the month, give you a chance to do some of your looking things up and see what you might want to do. And then we'll revisit this next month. All right.
In the meantime, we won't come knocking on your door or finding you or anything like that, so. No problem.
But do reach out to Chris to find out about whether you're paying commercial
Yeah.
rates for
Yeah,
water.
I'll send you an email with a follow-up on everything, so.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I believe that finishes that. We have correspondence. Is there any correspondence, Administrator Jenkins?
There is not.
There. Do we have any items for future consideration other than that one?
I just wanted to compliment you guys. I know it's a lot of your first meetings here, but this is probably the most meaty plan commission agenda that we've had. It's,
This is the biggest
For-
one I think I've been.
I know, since I've been here for sure.
Yeah, for a year.
So it's, which is exciting. We got a lot of new businesses coming into town and that's a good thing. So good job.
Sorry, the concert was amazing.
do
Thanks.
we no longer have an architectural board?
We do not. No.
We already are, actually.
Oh,
Yeah.
we
So,
are.
so all those powers got merged with the plan.
I was on the architectural board and then it all moved to the
Planning
planning
commission.
commission.
Yeah, that was like over 2 years ago.
Okay.
Was that because of lack of people or?
I mean, I can't speak to the political motivations, but the paper reason is because again, if you look at our ordinance, the Architecture Control Board didn't have any specifics of what they did, what the standards were that they were approving. I mean, like, whereas from a zoning perspective, you guys have specifics of it has to have this kind of this kind of masonry and landscaping and all that. So the Architecture Control Board didn't have any guidance, right? And so it was kind of a free will. Anybody can come in and say, well, we don't like it because it's pink, right?
We tried to follow, but oftentimes we would just pass everything over to the planning commission anyway.
Yeah.
So.
And there's a lot of redundancy too, so.
I have a random question. What is being done with the home on the corner of Milwaukee Street and Main? Was there a fire there? The old Ken Schmidt house? Is it just gonna remain with a big dumpster and?
At the one on the southwest corner,
Yes.
they had a kitchen fire this last winter.
Yeah, I can find out.
Nobody's living there.
Yeah, I can find out for you. I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah, Milwaukee and Fredonia, right?
Mm-hmm.
The mess.
We can follow up with you.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Is there any future development happening up off the Emerald Hills Drive behind the high school?
That is a very long story that I should probably not say in open session. But I can tell you when we finish up this meeting.
Well, on that note, do I have a motion
I'll
to
make a
adjourn?
motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, then this meeting is adjourned at 8:20. And you can stop the recording.
Yeah, no, she was just getting into it and she did an amazing job. She really
I'm
did.
glad.
Sorry, I was at my son's concert. So,
And my daughter's counts.
yes, at his daughter's concert.